What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Jaff Man. I'm your host, Jaff. Now, this is going to be an update to the M3. I bought the car for 6.6 and now I've spent about the same amount in fixing and modifying it, which isn't too bad because a decent M3 on the used market is about 15 grand in the UK. You can get some for 10, but it's all hit and miss, and if you want the best ones, it demands north of 15 grand. So the fact that so far I managed to get away with it spending about 12 grand, it's not too shabby. Maybe about 13 now with what happened most recently, but even so, I think I've done quite well. And by the time I hit 15 to 20 grand, the car will be an absolute gem, a one-off, unique, Singer, resto mod type thing that will be probably a lot more special than on the face of having a standard half-running M3. So this video is a bit of a lengthy one, but it covers everything I've done to it since I've made the last audio upgrades video about the M3, which is up there. The first 5 minutes or so are dedicated to the RTD shifter. I filmed that project the most because I tried to film it on purpose, whereas everything else is a bit of snapshots, pictures, and a little bit of videos here and there. But if you want to get an old car like this, whether it's an E46 M3, whether it's another M3, E30, which is going to be even more work if you ask me, unless you buy a restored one, or an E36, or even an E90, the early model. Whether you're buying an M3, whether you're buying any other vintage car, because at the end of the day, these are 15 to 20 years old now, it's going to be a labor of love. Nobody has an old car because it's cool. They only have an old car like me because you love it, or if you're rich and you buy a low mileage runner for a collection to be a garage queen. So with all this said, let's get into the first segment of this video. So here I'm just going to show you quickly how it is. You go through all of that space from that shed into the front of the house. I live next to a highway and there it is, the driveway. Quick tour of the garage. As you can see, I've got about 80 centimeters of space above. I've got air tools, I've got a decent sized compressor and loads of racking and shelving. Moving on, now I need to get the car in the air. Start with the baby jack, lift the nose so you can get the big boy jack in, take it up as high as you can, and then get some stands on the car. Do the same in the rear, get the jack in the middle, lift the whole car up, and then get the stands in, and you're pretty much good to go. I can go a bit higher, but I'm limited by my jacking height. And yeah, that's basically it. Now to the RTD, remove those interior bits and bobs, the gator, the leather boot, the trim, and some sound insulation and that rubber thing. Once you've done all that, you're pretty much done for this part at the top. Under the car, you've got to disconnect the downpipe to the cats, remove some catalytic converter wiring, remove the EGT sensor, and basically support the gearbox because there's a lot of fiddling to get off these beep clips. BITCH clips, because they're a bit annoying from this position. With the gear assembly removed, here you can see the difference, and it is a lot more of a unibody design. You can see the difference in the DSSR and the SSSR, and even the OEM 545 shifter that I had that improved the shift wheel kind of failed after 1 year of use and added to sloppiness in the gear change. This is the ZHP knob and the RTD knob. I'm going to get another heavier knob, which is the short shifter current version. You'll see that later on. Heavier is better. These are going to be the holes, and basically we're going to slot the shifter through like that, and basically it will sit just like that. And wow, already it looks pretty sweet. So after playing with the knob, which feels great, you have to cut a bit of the insulation at the top point so you can still get it in and block out some of that road noise, although this does add road noise. And if you're not a fan of that, it's probably not for you. I live with it because it feels awesome. And here it is all assembled. So, the RTD shifter, how is it? In a word, with this new knob, prime. If you know what that reference is, tell me in the comments. If you don't, you're probably too young. Let's see how this bad boy acts for the sake of the video. So, the shifter, what does it add? A bit of noise, a bit of extra toolness. The choice of gear knob seems to complement the car very well. The actuation of the gears, the feel of the gears, the shortness, the accuracy improvements, all point together into attaining what is my dream aspect with this car and the vision I have for this car, which is to make it a thing of feel. And what is feel? Well, I will quote you now a little clip from Rory Reid.
Once we drove to feel, but today we are numb, slaves to refinement, detached from the pleasure of the senses. Those who once sought thrills on four wheels now look elsewhere, but others, like me, we live to feel.
And second gear full. So with that said, a huge shout out to RTD for sorting out the shifter. Like I said, he sorted it out for me for free. If you want one, get one. As you can see, it's still bloody comfortable with the armrest. If anything, I find it more comfortable than before when my shift knob was down here. And I found that quite annoying to use with the armrest. With this, it's almost parallel. It's not quite parallel, but if I hold it like this, it's basically parallel. And that's it. So back to me on this sort of clip now. RTD was all great. Like I said, on rounding that up, Rory Reid story, I hope you guys like that. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is the carbon airbox. Now, soon after purchasing the car, this was one of the first mods I did, apart from doing some servicing and basic bits and bobs. This was the first mod. I bought a used Jeff Steele racing airbox off eBay from, I don't know who, I can't remember now, but essentially I got it off a race car for about 500 quid, which was very cheap because the cheapest alternative was a Jeff Steele Mark II. This is a Mark 1, which is about 1200. And this is not the best replica by any stretch of the imagination, but it is fully functional and looks alright, I guess, unless you look really close. But on the face of it, it's functionally same. It's used in Jeff Steele's race cars, making up to 450 horsepower. So yeah, it's carbon, it's Jeff Steele, comes with a race car, made by a race car team. It's absolutely fine. It had a few teething problems because it was for a race car. It didn't have a lot of the oil breather ports, so I had to buy some and get ripped off for £50 for some 3 tiny metal flanges by Jeff Steele directly, and cut some holes, do some wiring, make my own intake sensor loom, air intake temperature sensor loom. And basically I just used the standard E46 IAT and put it into the stock CSL position before I moved it even lower because of heat soak and those related things, to right into the bottom intake tract. I also went down the map sensor route. I got a generic GM map sensor that does 1 or 2 bars of boost, and basically spliced that into the brake booster line and wired it into the ECU. Got some pinouts from BMW. Didn't buy it from BMW actually. I found some online reseller for these specific pins that you have to put into the ECU loom plug. I'm going to link everything in the description that I used, even if I don't do it on the first day. If you come back within a few days, I promise it will be there. But basically got that on, got it mapped by a guy called Paul Claude from PCS Tuning. He was absolutely awesome without the whole procedure. Remote tune, not the best thing in the world, but he is known, he's done dozens of these cars, he developed it, racing his own car on the Nürburgring and whatever. It's good enough, it runs fine, it is great. So with the carbon fuel box out of the way and the remap done, basically I felt some hesitancy and a bit of lag here and there when I demand acceleration and demand throttle. So after a bit of ECU reading and parameters, I decided I'm just going to change the fuel pump and went for this WALBRO pump, the 255 or whatever the hell it is. It's cheap, cheerful, easy swap, bit of wiring, job's done. Didn't film it, but there are other guides out there. Next thing I went for was a big brake kit. Now, why did I go for one? Why this one specifically? Because it looks good. Hello? No, actually that is not the reason. I needed to refresh all the stoppers on my car. The discs and pads all around needed replacing, coming up to a total of about £500. So I thought, can I toy around with the idea of a BBK around this sort of price point, sub £1,000? Let's have a look. Went down the Porsche route initially, then realizing they're really old and a lot of people complaining about a lot of travel and they probably need restoration, so that goes over budget. Then I'll come across somebody fitting a F8X generation, so F80, F81, whatever, the current shape M3, as in the one before the 2020 or the 2021, but they haven't released that yet, so it's still the current shape M3, M4. And the M2, they all use the same steel brakes, 380mm discs at the front, 370 at the rear, 4 ports at the front, 2 ports at the rear. Managed to get the whole set with really good discs and even pads, barely used, for £600. Got some brackets for like 120, made some hoses for 65, some miscellaneous bits and bolts and bobs and whatever, about 850 all in. I managed to have a 4-corner BBK that's good enough for stopping a 400 plus horsepower, 450 horsepower M3 saloon. It's even heavier and whatever. So yeah, it's more than good enough. Brakes vastly improved, and yeah, as an added benefit, they look good. Next thing I decided to do was mess with the exhaust. Now you can easily get this bit wrong, and a lot of people do, but I've done a lot of research, spent a stupid amount of time on forums and things of that nature to find out what would be the best in my case. Now I need a bit more power, although you go the decat route, you get maybe 5 to 10 horsepower, I don't know, something like that. I went for 100 cell cats instead of the stock Euro 200 cells. I managed to sell mine actually for close to 600 quid and bought the Miltech 100 cells, which are made by HJS, so I mean they are very great quality, like OEM if not better, and they only cost me 350 by another lovely forum member. He sorted me out with that. So obviously I added a bit more flow, thought about headers, but in high horsepower builds or high states of tune, all the super sprint variants seem to lose power, so the stock Euro headers are good enough for 450 horsepower M3 race cars. So I just left them as is, went for 100 cells, give a bit more flow, maybe 5 more ponies, I don't know, but they do add a bit more volume and unfortunately a bit more rasp in this E46 S54 case. So to combat that, I got a Miltech Section 2, which is not something that might be the obvious choice, but Miltech Cat combined with the Miltech Section 2 seems like a perfect combination, and I left the back box alone, guys, because this is where you can ruin it. So the exhaust tone as it is sounds great. All I've done now is killed a little bit of rasp, or quite a lot of rasp. There's only the hint of rasp left. It's a bit deeper and a bit throatier with that Section 2 and obviously the 100 cell cats. In the future, I might go for an Eisenman if I am to ever change the back box. And yeah, I'll probably leave the rest of it alone. I'm very happy with it. It sounds awesome. But the carbon airbox is still louder, obviously. But where you do get to hear the exhaust in different tones and different rev parameters, it does sound great. The next thing I decided to do, now that the brakes were done, carbon airbox were done, I had to refresh the suspension, as mine became increasingly obvious that they were shot, and how obvious it was when I took them off from this little clip. It doesn't even go back up. That's how busted they are. We'll see the new ones as soon as we snap it. Are you recording it?
Yes.
Look at that pressure. So yeah, they were quite bad. I went for the ST XTA models, which are basically made by KW. They have race series coilover springs at the front, which basically mean they're club sport spec and they're a lot thinner and they're linear rather than the sprung type. They're just straight like this. So if you ever want to fit wide wheels in the future, you have a bit more clearance for those. And obviously they come with adjustable camber plates, although not the most important thing. With the ride height, I went for something like 13.75 inches at the front and 13.25 inches at the rear. This gives me the best balance to clear humps, because in the UK we have too many of them, and also especially living in London, inner London, there's bloody humps everywhere you go. So you don't want to ruin your car every time you have to negotiate a speed bump or piss everybody else off behind you because you're the guy that has to creep over them at 2 miles an hour. Baby monitor beeping away, telling me to check the temperature in his room. So the ST XTA suspension was definitely worth. Anything better than this, I would have to say you probably go Olin's Road and Track, because they are the daddy suspension kit for an upgrade for somebody who might use it on the road and track. I also did a mild interior refresh where basically I changed the ugly Titan Shadow trims that came with the car to a decent set of aluminium ones that I found. I really like those over carbon crap that everybody fits, because one, it didn't come with the car, and two, it doesn't fit the generation of the car. People weren't carbon crazy on every little interior piece back then. I like the contrast with the current black interior I have and the silver. And I also managed to change the front 2 seats to another set of stock ones that look practically brand new, because somebody had bought an M3 with like 13,000 miles on it, then took the front seats out, fitted buckets, and they sat in his shed for the last 8 years. So I'm the guy who managed to pick them up for really cheap. And then I sold my used battered ones onto somebody who fitted them in a Transit Connect van. But yeah, whatever, I'm happy, he's happy, the guy I bought it from happy, everyone's happy. All the work that I needed to do was taken care of, but something had to happen, which was quite alarming, as you can see from this picture of my face. And yeah, this is where it led to. So that knock was nasty. I had a whole belt drive refresh kit sitting at home for when I was next off. I thought I'd just get that out the way. That made no difference. Then I took the top of the engine covers off to see for anything obvious. Heard this rattle, but couldn't really determine that to be the root cause of my startup rattle, and I found that to be quite normal. And there was no choice. So I ordered a whole crap of parts. £600 later, got everything to bits, engine brace and everything I needed to do, because I suspected rod bearing damage. Luckily, look at that. Broken rod bearing, perfectly sitting in the end cap. Probably needed all of them to be changed. Done the engine mounts while I was there, but the main point of the story is that obviously I got very lucky. This is after the rebuild. So yeah, the rod bearings were the luckiest save. The car's coming together. What would I probably do in the future? Probably going to do a 3.91 diff and maybe some cams with some more tuning, and then finally some wheels and bodywork. By then I'll probably be 20 grand deep, but I'll have a very unique M3, and it will all be about feel, and it will all be about driving for that sensation and that connection between man and machine. So peace. See you next time.